Hi, I'm Poe Bronson. I'm the Managing Director of IndieBio, and this is Founder Stories, where we spend a little time with the CEOs of our graduating startups. And today I have Julie Kring, who's a biochemist and the co-founder and CEO of Khepra. Julie, thank you for spending a little time with me.
Happy to be here, Poe.
Now, I was going to show the audience your reactors that you've been working on while at IndieBio, but I can see you're in your engineering space. So why don't can you do a quick show and tell for us?
Sure. This is Arnie, which is a continuous flow prototype that breaks down plastics and agricultural waste into usable fuels.
And tell us a little more about, while you're getting set up there, tell us a little more about Arnie and what you're doing.
Sure. So Arnie uses a very unique method of energy transfer in order to break down these compounds. We use high-intensity focused ultrasound, which is ultrasound that is focused to a single point, much like a magnifying glass can focus the sun and create a really hot spot. Ultrasound, when it interfaces with a liquid medium, causes these compressions and rarefactions that can lead to the formation of cavities. These cavities fill with gas and they expand until they reach a critical size. This critical size causes them to implode, which releases a shock wave throughout the liquid medium. At the center of that shock wave, temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Celsius and pressures of 500 atmospheres have been recorded. And so we harness this energy in order to rip apart at the molecular level these high carbon wastes. And so what I mean by high carbon waste is when you do an elemental analysis of the material, you have about 70% carbon atoms relative to the other components. This high carbon aspect of the waste is really important because that's what makes it so we can make fuels that are nearly identical to fossil fuels. And in order to replace fossil fuels, we need to come up with a material, a fuel, which can be dropped into existing infrastructure.
Now, Julie, you said identical to fossil fuels, but you have a very different LCA than conventional fossil fuels and chemicals would. Can you explain that a little bit more detail?
Absolutely. So the first thing is that we can use renewable energy to produce these fuels. This is because we have a very unique design. In particular, the high-intensity focused ultrasound can be run on intermittent renewable generation. So that contributes significantly to the positive LCA, as well as the fuel we make does not have any nitrogen or sulfur-based gases, which those are some of the most potent greenhouse gases that come from fossil fuel. And then finally, oil extraction is about 45% of the total emissions from oil. And if we can eliminate that entirely, then we can have a huge impact on the planet. We can stop using, we can halt 2% of global carbon emissions year over year if we can stop extraction entirely. And then finally, this isn't included in our LCA, but the less waste that goes into landfills, the less methane and ethane is actually emitted into the atmosphere from these waste materials breaking down.
Now, you're speaking to some extent there about things that differentiate Khepra's technology from other waste to fuels or waste to value technologies. But can you broadly characterize what really makes Khepra stand out and differentiate?
The energetic efficiency of the reactor is much higher than previous biofuel-based technologies. So again, using ultrasound is a really, really important part of our reactor. It has a really high electrical to acoustic energy transfer, which means that we don't lose a lot of energy that we put into the system. This transfers about 80 to 90%, which reflects itself in the energy returned on energy invested of our system. Energy returned on energy invested is sort of the metric that is used in energy in order to justify different projects. So wind is about 18, and fossil fuel in the 50s was more like 40 or 50, but it's dropped down dramatically over the years as we've had to go into more extreme measures into creating the supply. In some cases, it's as low as 1.5. Which is actually comparable to a lot of other biofuel technologies. Our technology has, at the benchtop scale, an EROI of 3.6, but it can go as high as 18 to 20, which is a really big leg up on other forms of processing.
And reaching that sort of wind energy ERI. Now, one of the fun things to watch when you're going through IndieBio was that you went through all of the training for California ISO scheduling coordinators as part of your sort of customer discovery process, because your economics are good at just about any kind of price of electricity, but they're obviously the best when you can get behind the meter onto the grid. So can you talk a little more about that process?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, we can use industrial power and industrial power rates and still be economically viable. But we really do see an increase of our LCAs, as well as we shorten the time where we can pay off our project when we use curtailed renewable energy and negative prices associated with renewable energy. So the way that the energy market works in California is it's deregulated and it's managed through something called the California ISO, which is a wholesale market for power. And it's a bit of the Wild West. So I did spend many hours watching informational videos on how to participate in this market. But it really opened the door for us to be able to understand the dynamics of the California's energy market, which is unique because we have a lot of wind and solar. And ideally, we'd like to see markets begin to look a lot more like the California market so that we can, again, begin to remove fossil fuel-based sources of energy. But in my learnings, I came across something called the duck curve in California, which is during the middle of the day, we have a lot of solar supply, but not as much demand. And then in the evening, from about 4 to 8 p.m., that solar begins to dwindle, and we have to ramp up our fossil fuel-based power sources. The issue is we can't actually turn off those fossil fuel-based power sources during the middle of the day. Otherwise, this ramp up isn't fast enough. That's why California has been having such horrible blackouts over the past couple months. Again, from 4 to 8 p.m. And so what we've learned is we can actually take advantage of different market incentives, in particular congestion pricing curtailment and something called resource adequacy for down regulation as an ancillary service. And all that means is we can take that extra energy, that extra voltage, use it to create this fuel, and then that fuel can then be used in fossil fuel-based infrastructure, creating a completely renewable grid.
Now, this summer, BP made a major announcement that they were going to be investing very heavily into renewable fuels and chemistry. And you were talking to BP right around that same time. And they told you they wanted to see a plan, not for a small facility, but for a 25 million gallon annual facility. So what is the CapEx on a facility like that pencil out at?
So it would cost about $83 million to build this facility. And fortunately, with the economics of our process, we can break even on the facility within 7 years and begin gaining a profit in about 13. So this is actually in the ballpark of other refineries and other chemical processes, which gives us a lot of confidence that we can commercialize this technology successfully.
Great. Julie, thank you for spending some time and showing us Arnie. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Po.